Welcome to the Rethink Leadership podcast with me, Jeremy Blaine. I interview leaders, experts and business professionals from around the world who are bringing leadership principles and know-how into the digitally driven 21st century workplace, with focus firmly on the how-to rather than the what. Each episode is in aid of a charity chosen by my guests, and since 2020, we've made donations to over 80 global and local causes. Welcome to the Rethink Leadership podcast with my guest Rajesh Nagjee, a CEO mentor and business physicist who helps scale stage founders solve what he calls the velocity crisis. That's the widening gap between a company's systems and a CEO's capacity to run them at scale. His mission? To touch 1 million lives and pull founders out of the graveyard of burnout. Because Rajesh believes that many founders live in a gilded hell. They may have money, team, market momentum, but they have no time, they don't get enough rest, they never pause to take a breath, and in some moments they don't even recognize themselves anymore when they look in the mirror, and yet their boards demand more. Often this is called leadership, but to Rajesh it's elegant suffering. We dive into this a little bit more, finding out why this is happening, what are the symptoms, how does Rajesh use his CEO Freedom OS to help leaders everywhere out of this and into success. He's worked with clients all over the world to build decision maturity and scale sustainability with returns exceeding 500%. This episode is in aid of the World Federation for Mental Health, which promotes the advancement of mental health awareness, prevention of mental disorders, advocacy, and best practice recovery-focused interventions worldwide. Rajesh, thank you very much for joining me. Please introduce yourself as a business physicist and the main challenges facing startup and scale-up founders today, particularly as we look at the 2030s ahead.
Thank you for having me, Jeremy. I graduated from my first business school way back when in India, and I was at the top of my class. And when I came out of it, I said, man, I don't get it. I probably am dumb. So years later, I went to that time the number one business school in the world, London Business School, again at the top of the class. But I came out and said, I'm certified dumb. I really don't get it. And then I started thinking about this whole, business and business school and all that stuff. And then I realized that what we have in business schools is a lot of journalism, business journalism, a lot of history, and a lot of philosophy. None of those subjects is designed to make business work. It explains business. It tells us why so-and-so did well, etc. So I started searching for people who had applied physics to business. And one by one, I started finding them and I got certified. So I spent over 80,000 hours in getting certified in 14 different disciplines of physics, starting with the theory of constraints. So physics basically is a very simple, it's a one-line philosophy that the strength of the chain is equal to the strength of its weakest link. And unless you find the weakest link, everything you do on the other links is not going to increase throughput, is not going to increase success in any way. Now, the key challenges for scaling up companies is basically the companies are scaling up faster than they are scaling up themselves. So their competencies are remaining more or less where they were. So it's like saying, I'm trying to do, a 10th grade calculus on 7th grade knowledge of algebra. And that doesn't work, doesn't compute well, doesn't work well, and I'm in trouble. So the point is, and this is a very fine distinction that lots and lots of business owners don't get, that when you graduate from, let's say in school, from the 7th grade to the 8th grade, you graduated because you fundamentally capable and also competent. But the moment you land into the 8th grade, you're no longer competent to write the 8th grade exams unless you go through the whole year and build that competence. So every promotion lands you into incompetence. So when companies, businesses start to scale and grow, they reach the next level and the next level and the next level. and the business owners and founders don't realize that they're not competent to run the business at that level. So that's a fundamental challenge that people have. The 2030 is what we are seeing from now onwards, let's say in the next whole decade, is the complexity in business is outpacing capability. There's technical elements happening, there's AI happening, there are so many things that are happening. So how do you, configure yourself, your service offerings remain relevant? How do you make sure that the evolving needs and the outcomes that the client and target audience are facing is kind of like, if I look at myself, I had a very stable target audience for almost 30 years, and suddenly I find it's evaporated and gone. So I had to declare that my business as a coach, as a mentor, is now dead, and I had to reinvent myself. And I found that it was the AI that was unfolding on one side, plus my experience and frameworks. If I can combine those two together, then I've got another 20 years, of run. So unless you're willing to reinvent yourself, there's a huge challenge. The opportunity is huge because whatever the world changes on the outside, the inner game remains the same. The inner game is not going to change at all. It's, there's fear, doubt, anxiety, stress, all the rest of it on one side. On the other side, you got, all the outer game goals to pursue. And even though a lot of the mechanics change there, this is always going to remain the same. And that's where the opportunity is.
Yeah, so many things resonate here. Obviously, first I made a big note with a big exclamation mark by it saying 80,000 hours. Wow. But I get it with what you said, because that movement that every promotion then introduces incompetence back means that we're consistently working, and that 80,000 hours for you is 9 years of learning. I've calculated very quickly, and we've not stopped. So you've mentioned the frameworks around that. You've mentioned that inner workings and that inner shift that needs to happen. And it strikes me that a lot of it is about not the what, the why. It's about the how. That was what was missing for you when you came out of the classes, etc. But when I've looked through your books and your writings, I love something that you come out with. You often say that founders are driving Ferraris with sedan instincts, and with what you just said, I'm beginning to understand that now. So I'm going to put you on the spot. So what's the most common sedan instinct, let's say, that high performing scaling founders kind of cling to, being informed by the past rather than moving forward? And how does your framework that you mentioned help them shift that inner work, the inner operating system, to competence?
So the fundamental theme that I'm seeing in so many founders that I'm working with is that there is for them, because they're growing at a rapid pace, they don't realize that they've moved from, one stage to the next, and they remain very tightly in control of everything that's happening. And that is the sedan level way of working. Whereas the Ferrari is a beast, is a machine that can really, and they're basically, when you're scaling up, it's the closest metaphor that comes to my mind is a very high powered racing Ferrari that's going down a mountain road at 250 kilometers with the twists and the turns, chances of it going off. So the point is, unless you're licensed to drive the Ferrari, nobody is looking at what is the level of license that I have. So I'm running a startup business. Okay, got it. You got a license and you approved it. You're moving along slowly, but now you're scaling up. You got a leadership team. There are so many things that you're doing. Where is that new learning? Where are the new competencies that you require? I don't see anybody looking at that stuff. So this is the fundamental. Now, on the flip side, when you really look at as a startup, delegation is a completely different framework compared to delegation for a scale up. As a startup, delegation is principally about projects and tasks. So whenever you have projects, tasks, and scope, you converted your team into vendors. Whereas what you need as a scale up is you want your leadership team to be your partners. And they're only going to be your partners if you move to a new delegation operating system which works on ownership and outcomes. So that is the whole shift that needs to happen. And in that, there are all these inner game competencies that need to come through. And what I find is that when there is a distinction, a clear distinction in people's minds, they start their journey. Because if it is not distinguished, you don't know that there is a delegation at the level of a startup versus delegation at the level of a scale up, you're not going to even start the journey.
Yeah, it's great. I think it's a very good analogy. I've got a driver's license, but it doesn't mean that I can drive an F1 racing car from Ferrari, does it? It's really, and that point that you made, it's that new operating system. It's ownership and outcomes. Therefore, my inner game has to build the competencies that I can cope with that and manage it and bring others with me. So it's a really great way of explaining that. And if I go deeper into that, because you talk about kind of startup and then scaling up. So let me go into that sort of scale up, because this represents what you've just been talking about. Your equation is that sort of outer game, i.e. the systems and processes, whatever, minus the interference, which is your inner game, as you call it, is getting that right is the secret to scaling successfully. Could you explain that a little bit further and give us any examples of founders or organizations that you've worked with that have really mastered that and the benefits they've got?
So I was really searching for, this, how can we align the velocities of the outer game and the inner game of business? And that's when I stumbled upon the inner game of tennis by Timothy Galway. And he discovered or created this equation that performance is equal to potential minus interference. And the interference really comes from the inner game. And in practice conditions, he found that almost all players do extremely well. When they go into match conditions, there's all this interference that starts off, will I do it? Will I get it? What if I miss this shot, etc., etc., etc. So it's the same thing with, see, at the end of the day, success is very simple. It's, from a conceptual point of view, it's very simple. It depends on the quality of decisions that people take in just 4 areas: strategy, execution, people, and cash. And once you take those decisions and you start moving in that direction, there is you've got to keep on taking a call that, am I on target? Do I persevere or do I pivot? Now, do I persevere? Do I pivot? Is it based on what's happening in the outer world? Or is it based on the interference from the inner world, which is anxiety, stress, somebody said something, etc., etc., etc. So that's when people sort of start taking poor quality decisions. And when they start taking poor quality decisions, it slows the whole game down. Now, I've got any number of examples of people that I've worked with. So what I do typically is this has become so much part of my work that when I start a new assignment, especially if I'm working, mentoring the CEO and the leadership team, I take everybody away on a retreat, and I'm going to, basically, we go there and say, look, this is the reset. The whole company needs to reset for us to move forward. Everybody's super excited. I make sure that we've gone far away and nobody can run away from that place. And then we start day one on getting everybody to complete the relationship with their parents. And that is where they start getting those rough edges that create the disturbance in the inner game. They start to smooth away because I help them to put the past where it belongs. Unfortunately, the entire past of human beings is somehow or the other tied up with the relationship with their parents. So I've taken 40,000 people through this whole process. And because of that great experience that they go through and the success and the breakthrough that I see, it's a straight, if you ask me, what's the first thing that we need to do to get a team together and keep them moving is get them in a room and, get them to complete the relationship with their parents. So companies, there are so many companies that have just taken off. There's a events company. When I started working with them, there was attrition. They were going through 40% attrition every single year. Within a year, we brought it down to 0%. Then they became amongst the top 50 event companies in the world, and they have now taken off in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, and so on and so forth. And how did we do that? We got so we created a formal licensing process for people at different levels. What were the competencies that they required, the inner game and the outer game, the leadership, the communication, all the rest of it. So we formalized it. And getting that balance between the outer game and the inner game created this whole surge going forward.
Got it. It's fascinating. And the way you started that, I think is very relevant for today's workplace, which is moving so fast. That alignment of velocity of the outer game with the inner game in those 4 dimensions, whether it's strategy, execution, people, or the cash, and the subsequent decisions leaders make. In fact, you were describing at a point me in a way that I'm going to put myself out there here. In a lot of the failures that I've made, I've been driven by the inner game, inner anxieties when I'm trying to prove myself, let's say, possibly making the wrong decisions because I'm reading the situation wrong and internalizing it and interpreting it a different way. So I understand that. And that sort of tension between the decision that I make and then how I get involved, how I delegate others is really how I delegate with others really drives the how behind it. So if I bring delegation into that conversation that you've just had then and link it to the decisions, many founders may view delegation as simply, right, I just need you to do some tasks, okay? But you talk quite rightly about decision maturity. So if I'm a scaling CEO, which I have been in the past and I've fallen into the traps that you talked about, how do those CEOs distinguish a breakdown in their own operating system and how they delegate versus a breakdown actually at team level? And at what point do they need to stop fixing the system and start looking in the mirror?
So the short answer to that is every single breakdown emanates from them. It's not the team. And if you really look at it, and if you keep on drilling down to get to the lowest common denominator, what will start revealing itself is temporality. Is how do you experience time? And most of us experience time as past, present, and future. And, if you really look at the animals in the world, they don't have the past, present, and future. It's a man-made conversation. So I said, hey, somebody made up the conversation. I can make up the conversation myself. So I took the present, put it right in the middle, and I shifted the past a little bit and the future a little bit to create intersections. So whilst most people have only the past, the present, and the future, now I've got, instead of 3, I've got 5 places. So I've got the past, the present, the future, the intersection of the past and present, the intersection of the present and future, and the entire drama starts unfolding at those 2 intersections. Now, delegation, as people understand it, projects and tasks and all, the interference, all of that belongs at the intersection of the past and present, whereas new possibilities, new futures, breakthrough occurs at the intersection of the present and future. So getting that embedded in the collective consciousness of the founder as well as the leadership team is we start looking at, empowerment as distinguished, standing in the intersection of the past and present, and empowerment as distinguished, standing at the intersection of the present and future, are two entirely different things. And that empowerment standing at that intersection of possibility, opening that up, is something that enrolls people as opposed to convince or push them. And once they enroll in that possibility, they start really moving forward. So it's a whole new language of effectiveness that needs to come into existence, because at the intersection of the past and present, we have this dynamic called change, which is more, better, different. And whenever there is change, the more things change, the more they remain the same. So there's resistance. What we want is not change, but transformation. And transformation belongs to the intersection of the present and future, where transformation is really about opening up new realms of possibilities. And the new realms of possibilities, when they open up, it's a very fresh, it's a very enrolling conversation. You don't have to push people. There's a pull that comes through. And so that leadership is peer leadership, getting people to move forward. Did I answer your question, Jeremy? Because I think I took us for a very scenic ride.
Oh, no. Well, I can tell you, Rajesh, or should I now call you Coach Rajesh? Because I've got three pages of notes I'm learning from and writing furiously here. So no, absolutely not. And my takeaway from that is that we as leaders, founders, scale-up leaders, always need to be looking in the mirror. And I like that point, that intersection of the present and the future that you talk about, because that's where innovation happens, isn't it? That's where the possibilities are there. And it's great to ground this in founders and scale-ups. We're seeing so much more of that in the world today, driven by digital transformation first, now AI transformation second. So if I put you on the spot again, Rajesh, what three pieces of advice would you give all founders and scale-up leaders today as they look to accelerate through 2026 and beyond?
So if you look at, the common thread that is now being thrown at us at very, very high velocity is disruption. So earlier, the disruptions were happening one here, one there, and so on and so forth. But there's so much disruption that's coming our way through so many things. So what I have done for myself is to make sure that I stay ahead of the game is, first of all, I've got so much success under my belt that it goes to my head real quickly like this. Luckily, I have a wife and son who anchor me and put me down. But then, I also sort of am part of that team to say, hey, hang on, buddy, you haven't yet got life figured because you still can't walk on water. So then I said, okay, what's the best way for me to face, the disruption that's coming my way? Is that this whole conversation that we had a while back is that when a person gets promoted from the 7th grade to the 8th grade, he lands in an area of incompetence. So every promotion lands you into incompetence. And it's a chicken and egg situation. So here's what I do. Every single quarter, and this is to answer your question, what do I recommend for scale-ups to prepare to really accelerate growth, is I can tell you what I do. Every single quarter, I go and stand in front of my mirror and I declare myself incompetent in 4 areas. My first area is I'm an incompetent father. You see that photo behind me? That's my son when he was 4 years old. He's 26 now. And that's my most precious relationship. So I declare myself incompetent father every 3 months. Incompetent husband. She is just half a point behind my son, and she knows this. And the third is incompetent friend to self. And the fourth is incompetent coach. After that, by French law, I've got to now prove my innocence, as opposed to English law that I've got to prove the guilt. So then I say, hey, okay, I'm guilty, I'm incompetent. Then I start searching for evidence. And every single quarter, I find the damn evidence. When I find the evidence, I either go back to my coach and get sort that out, or I take on a framework, a study, certification, and so on and so forth. So what this is doing constantly is every quarter, I get a promotion, versus people are lucky if they get a promotion in 20 years or 10 years or 5 years or 4 years or 2 years. So the speed of promotion comes from the speed at which I'm declaring incompetence. So if you, Jeremy, tell me that, hey, Rajesh, in this whole conversation, I found 3 areas where you were incompetent. I said, thank you for that gift, Jeremy. Brilliant. I'm going to go to work on it. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to say, hey, what the hell, I don't have ego there. So that's the number one. The second thing is that there are only 4 things that we do as a leader, is that we ask, we listen, we speak, and we acknowledge. That's it. That's our toolkit. It's called the TALA toolkit. Tell, ask, listen, acknowledge. In the TALA toolkit, the default bottleneck for almost all human beings is listening. And there are 7 filters of listening, which, are available on, I can make them available for people if they're interested, is that these 7 filters hold people back. And when I worked with those 7 filters, I realized that every single human being is stuck with those 7 filters. And because I keep working on it and working on it, I have so much competitive advantage. So if people were to work on these 4 skills, basic skills, and take them to the next level, that's going to allow them to create the first fundamental of all success, is to create a consensus, to create an agreement, whether it is with suppliers or with customers or with their own people. And that's all a function of how you communicate using these 4 modalities. That's the second thing. And I don't know if you asked me, did you ask me about a book to read, or was there, I don't know what was the last bit.
Yes, please go ahead if you have a suggestion.
So there are many books that have had a huge impact on my life. So before I come to that, there's a very nasty question that entered my mind one day. I was at the airport, and there's enough time for me to search for a business book like most people do. So I started searching. They were very flashy, very nice. I looked at it, turned it around, and I don't know where the question came from. The question is, who got rich? Did the author get rich, or did humanity get rich? And that question has spoiled it for me. I can't buy books anymore till I found a few of them. And the one that really, there are 2-3 of them. I'll mention 2. The first is The Goal. Dr. Ellie Goldratt is How Do You Apply Physics, the Theory of Constraints. And the second is Outcome Driven Innovation by Tony Ulvik. And that's a brilliant book on how do you, again, apply physics to innovation. So these are the 2 books that pretty much, there's a tripod that I work with. One is the Theory of Constraints. Second is Outcome Driven Innovation. And the third is Dynamics of Strategy. And when you have a tripod, it becomes very stable. So I don't need too much more than that to get people on their way.
Well, I have to thank you for all of that. And I'm going to declare unashamedly my incompetence to you right now. And thank you for it. With the notes that I've made, even in the 20 minutes or so that we've had together, there are areas that I know that I need to now lean into a little bit more. So I've got next steps from this. I'm sure those tuning in have as well. So for them, Rajesh, how do they find out more about you and what you offer, get hold of your books and connect to continue the discussion?
So what I'll do is I'll share my, the link of where they can go. So perhaps you can put that in. But if they just look me up, rajeshnagji.com, they get onto my LinkedIn. The easiest is to connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a message if there's anything that they need. And, I post regularly, and all my content is meant to create subtle paradigm shifts. My practice is full. So I'm not really looking for I'm not selling. I'm not in the selling mode. I'm in discovery, in sharing, being very authentic, very transparent, and whatever resonates with people is what takes them forward. So it's a very fresh look at, of success, of so many things. So I share everything candidly, and most of what I share is, hey, look, this is where I goofed off. This is where I lost my way, and I enjoy it. So that's probably the best, is connect with me on LinkedIn, and then there are so many different resources that I can put in front of people. Yeah.
Well, that's very generous of you. Thank you very much. It's been a wonderful conversation, and many of us listening will be declaring that incompetence and taking some of your advice. So, Rajesh Nagjee, thank you very much for joining me.
Jeremy, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure, and I don't even know. I thought we spoke for 2 minutes, or was it more?
Yes. Time flies when you're having fun, Rajesh.
Yeah, I just acknowledge your competence. Yeah, so such a brilliant host, so easy to be with and just share. Thank you, Jeremy. Have a good one.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Rethink Leadership podcast with me, Jeremy Blaine. Please like, comment and support us on your favourite platform, and subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch as well as listen to each episode.